the second largest manufacturing industry in Europe, third largest national economy in the European Union, eighth largest economy in the world by nominal GDP, eighth largest exporter globally, and many more top 10 positions in the EU and worldwide. This is a story of how the economy of Italy nosedived and is still struggling to date. Let us jump right into it. Italy has battled several economic crises in the last 5 decades, ranging from the inflation crisis in the 1970s to the public debt concerns in the early 80s, currency volatilities in the 90s, the global financial crisis in 2008, the sovereign debt crisis, and so much more. Indeed, the Italian economy has been on a severe roller coaster and has somehow managed to survive through all these. However, now Italy is facing an existential crisis that, if not well managed, will not only impact the Italian economy, but also significantly disrupt the entire European Union. So, yeah, we're forced to ask, what exactly is the problem with Italy's economy, and why is it often in the limelight for bad reasons? Miracles don't just happen at religious centers, and as the American economist Barry Eichengreen has described it, Italy also experienced an economic miracle after the Second World War, when the economy bounced back from devastation. While many countries suffered the impacts of the war severely, Italy was among the very few that enjoyed economic growth, and this was because of several reasons. Much of the early growth was evident in the agricultural sector, just like Switzerland enjoyed immense growth in its financial sector during this period. Italy continued to live in this miracle even until the 1990s, when growth slowed everywhere in Europe. Unfortunately, we can safely say they ran out of luck as the post-war momentum completely faded while Italy had not prepared any new source of growth for their economy. Thus, the end of a once blossoming era. The momentum experienced its first decline in the second half of 1970 during the oil price-induced turmoil, with Italy's productivity suffering a steady decline that ultimately stagnated utterly in 1999. How did a miracle suddenly become the source of their problem? Or was it really a problem? Or was Italy not just adequately prepared for times like these? Italy is one of the most indebted countries in Europe and the world, with private and public debt totaling more than 330% of their GDP. Many studies have revealed that when total debt to GDP goes beyond 300%, the economic growth of such a country begins to fall, the cost of living skyrockets, and the standard of living tragically nosedives. Italy is 30% more than this benchmark, so you can imagine how badly the economy's growth has fallen since Italy crossed the excessive indebtedness threshold around 2010. Let's use Greece as a perfect example to put things into perspective. Greece suffered a similar debt burden in 2012, an experience that almost brought down the whole European Union, with some member countries still suffering the impact more than a decade later. Now, Italy is next. So, you see why the existential crisis Italy faces isn't just their business? Italy's average GDP growth turned negative in 2010, and since then they haven't been able to escape the depression. It's been more than a decade now, but Italy isn't even showing signs that a return to growth in the near future is possible. Circling back to the 70s and early 80s, Italy had an economy with so much potential, averaging an economic growth of 5 and 3%. So, what really went wrong? The massive indebtedness and faded miracle Italy is experiencing has resulted in symptoms of an even deeper problem. The working population in Italy is significantly reducing, and this itself is causing even more problems in the Italian economy. Let's break it down a bit. For an economy to work, it needs people between the ages of 15 and 64, regarded as the working age population. It's a no-brainer, really. These people actively work, consume more, spend more, and earn more income that the government can tax to support the economy and settle a major part of its debt. But this population is nearly non-existent in Italy, which explains why the country has fewer workers earning less income, which ultimately means less government tax revenue. 2 years after Italy switched from positive to negative economic growth, the working-age population also turned negative. But of course, it didn't happen suddenly. Italy had been aging technologically and physically for decades before reaching its breaking point in 2012. So here's the math. Italy has trillions of dollars in debt, yet it has close to zero tax revenue to support and repay its debt. This unbalanced equation is another crack where problems continue to seep into the Italian economy. To put it simply, the greater impact of this is that it's now even harder for Italy to overcome this depressing economic state, since people can no longer work, unless, of course, the government develops and implements certain policies to save face and help restore the working population. This may include easing the immigration restrictions, which is more apparent in the last 2 years now. Political instability is one of the primary reasons of a declining standard of living. Let's describe this as a ripple effect of the skyrocketing inflation the world is experiencing now. Many countries now struggle with political instability, and Italy is no different. Unfortunately, their unstable government is puncturing more holes into their already leaking economy, making things rapidly go from bad to terrible. Italy's political problems stemmed from chaos and the failure to form a stable coalition government. After several weeks of negotiations and multiple prolonged discussions, the M5S, EU skeptic populist group, and pro-EU establishment lawmakers just couldn't reach an agreement, leaving the country in a deep economic and political crisis. In March 2018, a hung parliament was voted in, but this didn't completely solve the instability as Italy was still without a proper government. A lot of back and forth between the parties involved, with the M5S party emerging as the largest contender and attempting a coalition government with the far-right Lega Nord party. A supposed breath of fresh air filled the air when two groups agreed to make Giuseppe Conte, a law professor, the prime minister. But this was short-lived, as Conte surprised everyone by resigning not long after, returning Italy to the starting point. The political brouhaha continued, with the eventual Prime Minister Mario Draghi also submitting his resignation letter in July 2022. Although the governor rejected the first resignation attempt, Draghi resigned again for the second time barely a week after, also leaving Italy with no one in charge until another election in September 2022. In October 2022, following the general elections in September, Italy appointed its first female Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, who is still in power at the time of creating this video. Italy's economic model strongly depends on family-owned companies. Honestly, this shouldn't be a problem. However, these family-owned companies in Italy are typically less productive and smaller. More sadly, these companies are diminishing, with those still operational continuing to downsize and get even smaller than their European counterparts. The Italian business model thrived significantly in the 70s and 80s and was a part of the economic miracle Italy experienced. However, the world has undoubtedly gone past this model, but Italy still seems to be stuck with it. Consequently, they struggle to compete globally, ultimately leading to the economic turmoil Italy is currently experiencing. According to the European Commission's SME tracker, at least 95% of businesses in Italy employ less than 10 people. Those that are slightly bigger have failed to innovate and embrace modernization for various reasons, including but not limited to family ownership, resistance to change, difficulty obtaining credit, poor management capabilities, and so on. As a result, efficiency and productivity are declining very fast, and if there isn't any intervention soon, most of these companies might just go obsolete, ruining the Italian economy even more. Italy's poor education system is the third most gruesome problem the country faces, behind the poor business culture and lack of industrial modernization. Italy operates a highly centralized and unionized educational system, which delivers poor results and ultimately forces Italians to abandon schooling and pursue better ventures. More than 70% of 25 to 34-year-old Italians hold a university degree. Italian teenagers perform woefully in science, reading, and math compared to their peers across Europe, and the dysfunctionality doesn't look like stopping anytime soon. But this fault doesn't solely lie in Italians not valuing education because of the lower returns it offers their efforts. The government also has a lot to do in this regard. The Italian government also sees education as less worthy and consequently doesn't allocate enough budget to spend yearly. Now, how does this result in their struggling economy? As we mentioned earlier, it's a ripple effect. Fewer graduates mean the lack of modernization will continue, and productivity will continue to tank, which reduces how quickly Italy can settle its debt and help the government earn more tax revenue. In all of these, a consistent pattern is emerging, right from the days of the economic miracle to the problem Italy currently experiences. Italy has failed to restructure its comparative advantage, and instead continues to borrow to sustain its economy. But the big question now is, how much longer can they continue to borrow with their debt profile being one of the highest globally? The poor education system, an unstable government, lagging innovativeness, and the aging population are also problems holding the economy by the throat. Surely, for Italy to grow again, it needs a conscious revamp of its policies alongside investing in places that truly matter, particularly infrastructure and education. We have now come to the end of this video. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to enjoy more videos like this. Bye for now, and see you in the next one.